Hello, I'm Anadi from SoundsOrange.com, and today I'm speaking from the heart with author and spiritual teacher Amoda Maa Jeevan. Welcome, Amoda.
Hi, Anadi. It's lovely to be here with you.
It's really fantastic to be speaking to you. I would like to speak to you about your fabulous new book, Change Your Life, Change Your World. I've read your book. I think it's fantastic. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Can you tell us a bit about how it came to be?
Well, it sort of arose unexpectedly in some ways on the back of my previous book, How to Find God in Everything, where I had created a very short online course with 10 lessons, 10 spiritual lessons based on how to find God in everything. And it sat on my desk, it must have been over a year, waiting to be created into this little online package, but I was never very comfortable with it. And I was clearing my desk one day and I thought, this is either got to be binned or I'll have another look at it. And as I read through the 10 lessons, I realised there was something quite powerful about them. And I didn't want to bin them. And as I contemplated the lessons, a deeper profundity came that was very relevant to where my message had evolved by then and to the evolutionary times that we lived in. So I just started writing a book. And there we have the 10 spiritual lessons for a new way of being and living.
Fantastic. And, having read the book, I'm really pleased you didn't bin it. What intrigues me is the fact that actually it came to you in a vision.
The original vision, yes, gave birth to How to Find God in Everything.
Okay.
The lessons are based on the details of that vision.
Okay.
So yes, I mean, essentially the message is the same in both books, but the lessons are more direct in the second book and take the vision and are very specific with the lessons within that, whereas the first book just presented the general principle or ethos of it.
Because that's one thing that inspired me with reading your book is it's not just another self-help book to be read. It's actually much more of a practical do this and before you move on to the next step.
Yes, it's what I call a spiritual workbook. Having said that, I just want to say that I'm really not into methods. It's not a method. It's not a technique. And what I'm writing about is an inner doing. It's an action that we take with our consciousness rather than an action that we take with our egoic doing self. Yeah? So it comes from being, and that's why I call it a spiritual workbook. Yes, there are some actions, but those actions are inner changes to how we relate to life.
Absolutely, and that really comes across in the book, I have to say. Yeah, it really does. So, what led you down this path of eventually writing books? I mean, some might say, what qualifies you? Obviously, you've had experiences that have led you down a path that have manifest books at the end, or the end so far.
Well, I can go right back to when I was a child and I always wanted to write a book. I always felt that that's what I would do at some point. I just loved books.
Right.
I didn't know what sort of book. I had been an academic psychologist for many years, so I am used to writing in that sense, but from a very scientific point of view. And then when I had my spiritual opening, if you like, in 1989, where everything really broke down and collapsed and my whole life imploded, and I left the academic world, in fact, immediately after that, I got a download for a book, which was at the time called A Handbook for Higher Health, which essentially is not dissimilar from the books that I'm writing now, but I didn't have the personal experience of having gone through what I call a spiritual maturation process or an emotional maturation process. So I got the download for how we can live an optimal life on all levels of being, physical, emotional, mental and spiritual, but I hadn't really lived those out in all areas myself. So I half wrote the book and then left it. And it was only till many years later that I wrote books that actually got published, because by then I'd had experiences and also the vision that I received in 2002 was crucial to the writing of these books. That was the final kind of piece of the jigsaw, if you like.
Right.
So that's where my authority comes from, if you like.
No, it's great. I mean, you know, it's funny, isn't it, that it takes these breakdowns of our lives to sort of go through these transformations that then, having practiced whatever we've learned for years and years and years, that then leads on to books like How to Find God in Everything and Change Your Life, Change Your World.
Yeah, it's like we need to go through the dark night of the soul to be born into a new part of ourselves, to give birth to that inner light. And whether that results in books or not is not for everybody. Everyone has their own path, but certainly gives birth to something new.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, or at least it's my observation rather than I think, that, you know, these types of books are all the more important now, aren't they, than probably they've ever been.
Well, I think that the message is coming through many people, and it's the same message, but it comes through in different ways, and the different frequencies of expression will tap into different people who need to hear the message in their own particular way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, moving slightly on from your book, other work you're doing. I mean, obviously you are a spiritual healer and you're out and about holding...
I'm a spiritual teacher, not a spiritual healer.
Sorry, a spiritual teacher. But you are out and about, you know, speaking in front of people and helping, aren't you?
Yeah, I offer the fragrance of my work through talks and workshops and retreats. But I guess, as I said earlier, it really isn't a method, and I've struggled with that for a long time, because I did used to teach a method.
Right.
And when I had the vision, that totally changed my life. All the methods dropped away. And in the dropping away, I struggled with what to cling on to in order to offer something of value to others. Because I was used to running workshops and retreats and taking people on a deep personal transformational journey, but I had tools and techniques that I'd collected, that I'd learnt, that I had drawn from my own wisdom, that I'd created. But now all those things fell away. So what is it that I have to offer? I mean, I offer my silence, but something more than that had to come through that silence. And so what I'm offering now is the purity of the teaching, which is really inviting people into the recognition of their true nature. So in that sense, it's formless. The only form there is the kind of vehicle of sitting together in a group. Yeah, so I'm not really even offering a meditation technique or anything like that. I'm not doing anything to anyone, and I'm not asking anyone to do anything. I'm simply allowing my words to flow and allowing silence to happen within those words, and so we experience the frequency of that silence. But I also talk about and inspire people, I hope, about the evolutionary times that we live in. So in that sense, it's not like traditional spiritual disciplines where you just sit in silence. I'm also talking about how from that silence we can be active agents of change in the world, so that our doing comes from right being, and how we can call forth that awakening within ourselves, if that's what's happening, which I think it is for many people, to call it forth into our lives through our personality vehicle. Because we still have a personality and we still have an egoic self. It's just that that egoic self can transform to an aware ego, which then chooses how to express its awakening in a way that serves the bigger picture. And that's what I'm excited about, and that's kind of what I'm writing about as well.
I mean, that's an amazing gift, isn't it, to the world? I mean, to allow people to have that awareness themselves. You know, I think showing people their own silence is actually the way forward. I mean, that's the best thing you can ever give to somebody, isn't it? I think, you know? Yeah,
but that's the place that peace comes from, and we recognise that peace is within. But then there's a doing that comes from that. So it's not just resting in peace and in silence without that informing our daily lives, because we've still got arms and legs and we do things in the world. And it's that I think is transforming the world, is how we do things is changing, why we do things. But that how and why comes from the state of consciousness that we're operating from. And that's what my book's actually relating to. It's like the inner change, the inner shift, the inner transformation in how we see things. And then how we see things is how we experience things, and then how we experience things is how we do things. So it kind of goes right back to the root of transformation, which is really our perception. Do we see through the eyes of love, or do we see through the eyes of fear? Do we see through the eyes of God, or do we see through the eyes of ego? And that's a huge turnaround that we can create in ourselves.
Just through awareness, really.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Is the most powerful tool.
Fantastic. And you've mentioned a few times your vision.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. I had reached a point in my life, this is around the year 2000, where I was teaching, I was doing personal transformation, I'd gone through many spiritual experiences, I travelled to India, I had my master, I dropped my name, I gained a new name, I'd been in deep meditation, and I'd got to a point where I'd kind of dropped searching for anything else, in the sense of a new teacher or a new teaching. I was kind of feeling in the flow of life. But one thing happened that rocked my life once again, which was that I had a major breakup with my husband at the time. And it rocked me to the core this time. And in that rocking, it took me to a very dark place of abandonment on a much deeper level than just the small me, identity me being abandoned. It was a deep spiritual abandonment. And I felt it as a big black void, and it started to become bigger and bigger in my life, that experience. So externally I seemed to be in the flow, and I was quite successful, and it was fun, but inside something was really cracking. And there was a point in my living room at the time where I felt that the suffering that I was experiencing internally was just too great. And that once and for all, I wanted the answer to that suffering, the way through that suffering. And that became so important to me. It was more important than looking for another relationship. It was more important than looking for love. It was more important than any distraction that I could have through my external circumstances. More important than my success or anything else. And so I kind of screamed out in some way, show me the way through suffering. And it was kind of directed at God, but I didn't really believe in God. So it was directed at something, some higher power. And my body just gave up in that moment, and it just lay on the floor. So I just lay down in this kind of place of surrender. And in that surrender, I went into a kind of visionary state where I experienced this journey, if you like. And afterwards I wrote it down, and that became the basis of my book. I mean, I can describe that journey if you wish.
Oh, go on, that would be interesting. Yeah, fantastic.
As I fell to the ground in this deep surrender, I found myself walking through the valley of death. And the valley of death was a very dark place, or is a very dark place. And I experienced all the pain that I had ever experienced in my childhood, and I've had quite a difficult childhood. So I experienced all the broken promises and the abandonment issues and the emotional issues. And so I experienced my personal pain. I also experienced collective pain. So I've experienced the millennia of humanity's pain, the suffering, the torture, the whatever. And I started to get heavier and heavier as I walked through the valley of death, and I felt like I was going to die, that there was nothing I could do. I couldn't be saved, and I couldn't save anyone. So I felt myself lie down in the valley of death. And initially I struggled, and then I surrendered. And in that surrender I had a moment of gratitude. I had a moment of real gratitude for my life. So I said, thank you, God, for my life so far. I was only 42 at the time. It's really short, but I'm willing to die. And in that willingness to die, a small flame lit up in my heart. And it was like a light that emanated from my heart. And as it emanated out, it became a set of golden steps, like the golden staircase to heaven. And I found myself rising up from this semi-death realm and walking up the steps. And as I walked up the steps, I had to be very present to each footstep that I took, because there was this incredible pull backwards into the valley of death, in which I experienced as fear, incredible fear and victim consciousness. And so I stayed present with each step, and then when I looked up to see where I was going and what might come at the end of the golden staircase, I experienced this incredible pull towards this idea of salvation. And that also, neither of those options were the right attitude, if you like, because they both pulled me off this golden staircase. So I had to be really present, and I had to be really open. In other words, no expectation, no past fear, no future hope, just being totally okay with where I'm at now, but still taking the steps. So as I did this and went up each step, I became increasingly naked, both physically and metaphorically. So I became like a child, I became innocent, I became transparent, I became without baggage. I seemed to drop the layers of my conditioning and became this pure, if pure is the right word, naked, I prefer the word naked being. And I finally reached what appeared to be the top step, and a thought passed in my mind which was, oh, I've arrived at heaven's door, and now I can rest. In other words, sort of sweet oblivion for eternity. But that didn't happen. I found myself feeling the presence of, I can only describe as the I amness of God, a kind of masculine presence without a gender attached to it. Simply presence. I amness, I am here. And in the vision, in the journey, I saw this as a kind of masculine being, if you like, or energy. And I climbed into his lap, knowing that this was our Father, or my Father, the Holy Father. And what happened was that I merged with this energy, and I experienced the power of my own I amness. My I amness without identity, not I am this or I am that, but simply I am. Yeah. And I embodied it. And at the same time, I experienced the Holy Mother. And I merged with the Holy Mother and experienced the power of compassion, or the power of my heart, not even my heart, the collective heart. And there was such love, and again, not love attached to anything, not love wanting anything, just simply the bowl of unconditional love. And then this third thing happened, which was out of the womb of the Holy Mother, out of the union, if you like, of the Holy Mother and the Holy Father, which was ultimately myself, was born the third quality, which was Christ consciousness, the golden child. And I experienced myself as this spark of infinite divine potential, the seed of awakening that is born out of I amness and out of the bowl of compassion. And this seed, if you like, of the golden child was the new human being in me, in other words, my awakened consciousness, and the new human being in terms of collective transformation, the new humanity that is being born out of awakening, personal and planetary awakening. And as I experienced this, there was a milk, the milk of human kindness poured from the Holy Mother's breasts and poured down the steps and repopulated and refreshed and regenerated the valley of death to become a living paradise on earth. To me, this was the transformation of humanity, of the earth, through the awakening that is happening during these evolutionary times. So when I finished experiencing this vision, I was like blown away. I wrote it down and then I left it for a while. When I went back to it, I realized there was a teaching in there for me, and that experience never left me. But there was also a message for humanity. It wasn't just to be kept within my own experience. That's when I felt drawn towards birthing a book and to actually speak about this vision, which I initially spoke about quite literally in the way that I'm describing now. But then, or now, I tend not to really talk about that unless somebody really wants to ask about it, but has become the 10 lessons in the new book. I've delved into exactly what that means. What are the lessons within that? What is the transformation that's happening, and how can we harness that and assist it? And that has become 10 spiritual actions. I'm sure it could be more than 10 spiritual actions because it's endless. It has no number to it as such. But in order to ground it and put it into words and put it into practice, those are the elements that seemed important to me, and also the elements and practices that I did in my life following that vision for several years, which then totally turned my life around.
Wow, what a beautiful experience. I mean, it's a shame, isn't it, to have to go through such suffering to experience those visions, but I mean...
I think there's no way through without going through suffering.
Maybe.
I don't mean endlessly, but I think that the depth of darkness that we can go to gives birth to the strength of the light in equal proportion. I think that if we just skipping through life without experiencing both polarities, then that light can't really be harnessed.
Absolutely.
Which is not to say that might be the case in the future. I think that new beings or children or human beings are being born these days that perhaps don't carry that amount of karmic or personal, emotional baggage or conditioning, because they're being born to more conscious parents and more conscious families. But that's part of the evolutionary process.
It does seem to be, doesn't it? Sort
yeah.
of both opposites, the yin and the yang, and the light and the dark. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. And what is amazing as well is, like, I think having dived into the depths and risen to such light, that the authenticity of that definitely comes across in your book, which I can only congratulate you on. I think it's going to help a lot of people. So if you could put into, say, a sentence or 2 sentences your message to the world, what would that be?
I feel the message of our times is that we become beacons of light. That's not to deny the darkness, yeah? It's to be able to walk through the darkness steadfastly with an open heart. And that darkness might be a personal darkness that we're experiencing, whether that's some situation that's happened in our lives that rocks us, or some sudden change or loss. And it's also the collective darkness, the kind of global breakdown that appears to be happening, the environmental threat, the fear and anxiety that's around whether we'll survive as a human race. I feel that it's our job, if you like, as individuals, to become beacons of light. As I say again, and I'd like to say it again, it's not about living in a fluffy new age world where we're just beings of light and everything's lovely and it's all love and light. It's about being real. It's about being authentic, and it's about staying centered and grounded amidst the darkness without having a story around it, which is what I mean by activating that inner light. So we become beacons of light in our own lives, so that we're choosing to operate from love and not from fear, whatever's happening around us. And by doing so, we become beacons of light to others.
Fantastic. I think that's a fantastic message. I like that word holistic, because it means to embrace the whole, which includes the light and the dark, Online resources, do you have any that people can look at and find out what you're up to? And
yes, you can go to my website, amodamaajeevan.com.
Okay, can you spell that?
Yes,
just in case?
AMODAMAAJEEVAN. So that's the mouthful of my name. AmodaMaaJeevan.com. And there's a load of videos on there, audio recordings, all of which may provide some insights. There will be a lot more live events. They're just emerging as the year progresses, and that's a great way to experience what I have to offer. And of course there's the books as well, which it's available for pre-order right now.
Where is that available? Is
Amazon.
From
Yeah.
Amazon, okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Amoda, thank you very, very much. That was very informative and yeah, brilliant.
Great, thank you, Anadi.
Thank you.